Welcome into NHL Tonight, first shift for a Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. EJ Raddick here, along with Stevie Konroyd joining us today. Welcome. It's your first time here in my little lair.
Your basement.
First shift. Yeah, it seems, I wish this was as neat and tidy as my basement, and I don't have all the jerseys, so that's another issue.
I'm a little disappointed. I played on 6 different NHL teams.
Yeah.
I thought I might see one back there, but no.
Yeah, well, listen, you're going to have to come back.
That's right.
You're going to have to come back. And then you're going to have to give us the order in which, because you can see, there's only 4 there. So you're going to have to give us your order of preference.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I would say a Blackhawks jersey.
Yeah, Chicago would be there. Calgary would definitely be there.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun in Hartford. I think you'd have to bring back a Hartford Whalers
we have to
jersey.
get one of those.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
They're still one of the best jerseys ever.
It is. They still sell quite a few of them. And maybe the Islanders, or no?
Yeah, the Islanders.
Why
definitely.
not?
I was an assistant captain in the Islanders.
You got to have an Islander jersey back there. All right, we're settled. So write that down. So when Stevie comes back, we'll have the 4 jerseys up there for you. That's the way we do it here. And, hey, I want to give a quick shout-out to Ryan Warsofsky, the San Jose Sharks head coach, because he joined us on opening night, game day, which is really great to do that for us. And it's been a struggle for the Sharks, but they rallied last night, a furious rally at the end of that game, and they won in overtime against the Utah Hockey Club. So congratulations to Ryan Warsofsky on getting his first NHL win behind the bench.
In dramatic fashion.
Yeah, that was a great last 5 minutes, 3 goals, and then they score in overtime to get the winner. So the fans in Utah are learning about all the different things that can happen, good and bad, in a hockey game. So congratulations to Ryan. And you know, we look back on last night. I mean, that was tough for Connor McDavid. Let's get right. First things first. Let's get to the McDavid thing.
Sure.
Because you know, I was trying to navigate it on video, and here's a look at it. He looks like he gets tied up or tripped up a little bit, goes into the boards, and he looks okay here, but then, you know, he went to the bench, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, you know, we were doing the game last night, and we came into this live, and this is where I noticed. Right here, he lifts up his left foot right there. He doesn't want to put it down again.
Yeah.
So I likened it to, I've been in games where I got injured, and because the adrenaline's flowing, you don't really notice it at first, but then after 20, 30 seconds, the pain sets in, and that's when you notice it. And you see what he's done this year already, which is, you know, Connor McDavid-like. I mean, he could probably up it a little bit, and he normally does in the second half of the season. But if the Edmonton Oilers are to be without his services, that is a huge, huge hole to fill. So we don't know exactly what it is. I've been told in the past, like with ankle injuries, sometimes it's better if you break your ankle than if
the high ankle sprain.
And then the high ankle sprain or ligament damage, because those tend to take a lot of time to heal. Lingering injuries. So
we hope nothing is wrong with him. Maybe just a little tweak, and he's going to be okay. Now, he did go back to Edmonton. The team finishes their road trip in Nashville coming up, I believe it is on tomorrow or Thursday. I can double check that. But the bottom line is he's back in Edmonton. He's getting looked at, getting evaluated. So let's hope that he's going to be okay. And, you know, you're right. Like, Connor McDavid has 10 points in 10 games, and everybody's like, yeah, he's not quite playing that well so far. I mean, that's a point per game.
I know.
Right? Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. And the Oilers have been playing pretty well lately until last night when it did not go good against the Jackets. They beat up on the Oilers 6-1. Last night also was a big night in Tampa. We talked about it a lot going into the game. Steven Stamkos returning to Tampa now as a member of the Nashville Predators. I'll ask you first of all, I mean, I still cannot believe that he is not a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He just seemed like he should have been there forever. And it was surreal to see him back there in that dramatically different Nashville Predators jersey.
Yeah, he was the face of the franchise, and you know, I heard some of his comments before the game. He grew up there. I mean, he got there as an 18-year-old. He left as a 33, 34-year-old.
With a family.
With a family, with a couple Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
And that's why the fans love him so much. And he was involved in the community. I know he did some hospital work for the Children's Hospital.
And all kinds of work in the community.
Yeah. So, but you know it as well as I do, EJ. It's a business, and it's not about feelings, and it's not about, you know, what do the fans think? It's about what's my team going to be in 3 years. And Julien Brisebois, give him a lot of credit. That was a tough decision to make, the general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But he figured, you know what? If this team and our window is getting smaller, I don't think we can keep a 35, 36-year-old. You know, what would he be right now?
It would have taken him into it because he's
34.
Yeah, so it starts to take him into that later window, depending on the term of the deal.
Right. So you replace him with a Gensel. You get a younger guy. You get him for 7 years, and you end up paying more money for Gensel, but you're going to have a guy there. And the thing is, we know the cap's going up, so that next year and the year after especially, that some of these big contracts you're looking at right now all of a sudden become a little more manageable because of that cap.
Yeah, but it was a heck of a night. The Tampa Bay Lightning put on a great show. It's a great video. The fans really responded. I guess if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, it was the best of all worlds for you because you got to see your guy, Steven Stamkos. You got to maybe shed a tear and have a little emotion, the video tribute. You got to see him get on the board with a couple of assists. But in the end, Tampa Bay Lightning ended up winning the game in overtime.
Yeah, your team wins, and it was. I was a little surprised at the lack of emotion from Stamkos during that video presentation, and he looked pretty stone-faced, and maybe it was because he's upset because he's not a Tampa Bay Lightning anymore. But then they went to John Cooper on the bench, and John Cooper would look like he was ready to cry. And the same with Victor Hedman too. And you know,
they were all applauding, and Kucherov was standing applauding.
Took his gloves off and was applauding. But you know, I go back to relationships between coaches and captains, and you think of what John Cooper's been through with Stamkos, and you know, the fact that he won a couple Stanley Cups, and he is his ear in the room, and he's also like a coach. So they had a really close relationship, and I think that's why it probably hurt John Cooper more than anybody to lose his services.
Yeah, no question. He was such a fixture there, and you know, he's probably like. Let me ask you, Steve, because like we were kidding. Obviously, you played for a bunch of teams, but you started your career, I believe, in Calgary, right? And then you moved to the Islanders. When you, like any player, when you start your career, somebody you don't anticipate leaving. So, like, what was it like for the first time? I know it was a different circumstance and it was a shorter period of time, but it is weird to go into a building where, you know, for X amount of time, you turned right and went into the home team room, and then the next time you go there, you turn left and you're going into the visiting locker room.
Well, I don't know if we have time, and I'll make it short. Quick story. So when I got traded from Calgary to the Islanders, we were in the island.
That was day of, right?
Day of. And I found out that morning, Badger Bob Johnson, God rest his soul, called me up and said, Stevie, come up to my room. And it was the day after the trade deadline. And so I went up to his room not expecting anything. He said, we traded you, and the funny thing is we traded you across the parking lot here. We're staying at the Marriott right across from Nassau Coliseum. So I went down. This was before the internet, before you know, Twitter. So I'm skating around with the Islanders in the morning, and the Calgary Flames start coming up. No one's heard about it, and they see me skating with the New York Islanders.
Like, what's going on here?
Crazy. So they took a shopping cart, moved my stuff down the hallway to the New York Islanders dressing room, and I'll tell you what, the first shift I was out there, I wanted to pass it to Lanny McDonald. I was looking at Lanny, and I wanted to give it to him. I saw those red jerseys, and it took a little while, but good news is we won that first game.
Yeah, that's crazy because I believe it was you and Rich Crom.
That's right.
Going to the Islanders for John Tonelli. And you remember, the Islanders had won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. Tonelli was an integral part of that. His number's since been retired. So, and you're right, it wasn't in an era where everybody knew. I'm sure there were people that went to the rink that night that would see at the Nassau Coliseum that saw John Tonelli playing in the Calgary Flames and thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
Right? They probably thought, what is going on here?
Yeah, you know, and those were huge shoes to fill, and it was me and Richie. And Richie actually started. I think Richie Crom scored 6 goals in his first 5 games, which was unbelievable. And yeah, and you know, I got to know Johnny. Johnny rented my house in Calgary after the trade. Him and Nick Fatiou.
Okay, well,
Nick Fatiou was there too. So great guys, but yeah, it's
a weird feeling, right?
It's a real weird feeling, and I felt for Stamkos last night. But now it's over with, and now we can just concentrate on hockey.
Yeah, and for the Nashville Predators, right? It was a really tough start. 0-5. They won their next 3. At least they get a point last night in that game, which was big because they were trailing in the game, and that's been kind of a symptom for them. They've been falling behind early in games. That's not a good habit to get into.
No, and especially with a team that, you know, in the offseason, the things they addressed were scoring. You know, you think about what they did in the playoffs last year against Vancouver. They lost in 6 games. They only scored 12 goals. So Barry Trotz, you know, decides, hey, let's go and get some scoring, and you know, and they got a Stamkos and they got a Marcia. So those guys haven't been lighting it up. I think it'll come eventually, but yeah, to get a point out of that game last night, that was huge. And in the Central Division, you talk about tough divisions. You know, whether it's, you know, Central is just loaded. You know, minus the Chicago Blackhawks, I guess, but Chicago beat Colorado last night, but you've got a really, really strong division, and that's what you have to worry trying to get out of.
Yeah, and everybody's gotten off to a good start. Winnipeg, Dallas, Minnesota, St. Louis, Colorado's playing better. You know, that leads me to Winnipeg, because Winnipeg started the season with 8 consecutive wins. When you go back to last regular season, they had won 16 consecutive regular season games going into that game last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the Leafs got out to the big start in the game, had a lead. The Jets pushed back late, but in the end, the Toronto Maple Leafs find a way to get it done. John Tavares with a hat trick in the game. You can see the numbers right there. But, you know, listen, nobody's going 82-0.
No.
Right? But the Leafs needed that one last night, because it's been a little bit of a bumpy start. I think they got off to like 4-1, then they lost a couple in a row. They needed that one, and they came and played a very good game in Winnipeg.
Yeah, this was, I believe, was the second of a back-to-back for Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, for this to come in here and beat an undefeated team, they made Winnipeg look bad. In fact, it was 4-0 2 minutes into the second period, 3 minutes into the second period. They outshot them by a large margin. So for Winnipeg to come back in that game, yes. Toronto Maple Leafs still, to me, though, they're a Jekyll and Hyde team. You know, they lose to Columbus. They lost a close one to the Boston Bruins, and then they go and they beat, you know, one of the top teams in the NHL quite handily. So, you know, I think they'll get it right eventually. It's just these players are under so much pressure, and especially in the Toronto market, that everything they do is highly scrutinized. And, you know, I think sometimes the pressure gets them. So Matthews still hasn't been the Austin Matthews we've seen in the past. He's got some half-decent numbers, but, you know, I think you'll see him score 8 goals over the next 4 games. You know, he'll get on one of those heaters.
Yeah, for the record, the Leafs did have a day off before that game. But one quick thing about Matthews, he's wearing the C this year. I mean, I think he should have been the captain in Toronto for the last several years. But he is off to, at least from production-wise, a slower start. Does that weigh on a guy? And, you know, you were in a lot of locker rooms, a lot of different guys that wore those letters. I mean, you just said before you were an assistant captain on the island. Does it weigh on people?
Yeah, I think it does. You know, maybe it's not so much as an assistant captain, but certainly a captain, and certainly in a market like Toronto, because, you know, hockey is absolutely everything. And whenever something happens and somebody's got to speak to the media, it's going to be him. And when somebody has to get up and speak to the team, you know, it should be your captain. So, but some guys take it to another level, and I hope that happens with Austin Matthews, because with you know, with the added responsibility, you know, sometimes guys get better, and you know, I hope that happens, especially in the playoffs, because you know, there's one area that maybe the Maple Leafs have stumbled. Well, we all know that they've stumbled in the postseason, and if he can bring it to another level in the playoffs, that's just going to help everybody.
All right, so the Leafs with a big win over the Jets. Jets back to the drawing board. You weren't going to win all of them in Winnipeg for the Jets fans watching, and they'll get back to work later in the week. When we come back, we'll get to work with Mike Kelly, and we'll talk a little bit about the Colorado Avalanche. And is this a goalie problem, or is this a defensive problem with the Avs right now? We'll talk Avs with Mike Kelly next on First Shift. It is time for a mic check, and that means our NHL Network analytics expert, Mike Kelly, takes some time to join us right now. Mike, I'm really happy to have you on. We're through almost a month of the season. We're headed towards November, so I wanted to check in with you and see what trends or things are on your mind. So I want to start. You're talking about offense in the overtimes has been way up. What are you seeing in these overtime sessions?
I don't know, EJ. Should we credit the teams for knowing how to create offense, or have people forgotten how to play defense in overtime? Maybe the two kind of go hand in hand.
Maybe both.
Yeah, maybe both. It could definitely be both. People want their cookies in overtime. So year over year, look, it's been kind of like 2/3 of games will go to a shootout-ish, right? You look at the last few years, around 65, 69, 70%. 27 out of 32 games this season that have gone to overtime have ended in overtime. And I think that's what fans want to see, right? Like it's a lot of fun when you're watching 3-on-3 games and breakaways and chances and not going to the shootout. So we've seen a ton of that. So I dug a little deeper to see, okay, like, is this kind of an anomaly, or are chances really up in overtime, or should we expect a lot of games to continue to end in overtime? And yeah, like goals, if you look per 5 minutes, goals are up, chances are up. Offense in general is up in overtime. So these coaches know what they're doing offensively. You just look at last year compared to this year, in terms of per 5 minutes in overtime. Rush chances are up by 1, scoring chances are up, expected goals, and then ultimately the goals. So I don't know about you guys. I love seeing games end in overtime.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey, Mike, Edmonton Oilers are in familiar territory. Last year they had the horrendous October. This year, not quite as bad. They're sub 500. But you don't think they're as bad as their record shows. Explain.
I do not. And I realize I'm coming off a game where I probably should not be pumping the Edmonton Oilers tires because they were horrendous. Yes. And they lost Connor McDavid, hopefully for not too long, but that was scary to see. Look, we've been through this before, right? And a year ago, I talked about this. The Oilers are not broken. They are in a funk. Some of this needs to be corrected. They made a coaching change. And some of it was just a matter of regression. And then they were fine, and they went to the Cup final. It's even more extreme this year. You look at October stats from last year to this year. Just look at the left column first. Rush chances, they were okay, bottom of the league at goals. Expected goals, they were okay, 23rd in goals. That all kind of went back to the middle. They started to score a lot. They were a good hockey team. This year, they're third in rush chances, last in goals off the rush. Expected goals overall, just your goal probability based on what you're creating offensively. They're fifth. They're dead last in goals. This is not going to continue. It will absolutely not continue. So can you tweak things, fix things? Of course. The Oilers are a great team. They're going to be a great team again before long.
Well, why is their power play struggling so much? Again, I mean, you know, it is a short sample size, and we've seen this movie before where they get things going, but, like, you know, it's just odd to me that their power play has struggled so much.
Yeah, well, that's been curious. I think it kind of goes together collectively with the whole thing where the team's just having trouble putting the puck in the net. It's not a process that I think is broken. You're watching the Maple Leafs, a team with a ton of talent that's always been good on the power play. They have the same thing happen to them, and they're switching things around. So the one thing I'll say is, like, you talk to players, and I've talked to players about this, about superstar players, and said, like, can these guys really lose confidence at times? And they say, yeah, 100%. It can happen to McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, the best of the best. Maybe there's some element of that, but they're just not things that I expect with this team to continue over a long sample. Again, stressing the fact that you can always be better and make improvements to be better as well.
Mike, we got a big tilt tonight. The Washington Capitals against the New York Rangers. And when you think about the Rangers, you think about Panarin and Zibanejad and Kreider and Lafreniere now. But the third line is doing a lot of damage. I'm talking about Hedl, Cooley, and Kakko. Can you talk about the year they've had thus far?
Yeah, Connie, 100%. I think you can make an argument they've been one of the best lines in the league. And, you know, obviously as not a true top six line, they get some favorable matchups. But the Rangers, you know, they've been driven by their power play and special teams and goaltending for a couple of years now. So when you're getting 5-on-5 production, not only from a line, but from a third line that looks like this, 80 minutes almost, inner slot shots heavily in your favor, you're expected to generate about 70% of the goals when you're on the ice. You're actually generating 100% of them because they've scored 8 times together and they haven't given up any. They're the only line in the NHL that scored at least 5 goals and given up 0. So, look, I'm not going to say they're the best line in the game right now because there are others that face tougher competition and are expected to do different things. But, man, when you look at this Rangers team and you're like, we're getting this from a depth line like this, they were already great last year. I mean, if this can continue, it's going to be maybe a difference maker for them getting to the next level. Depth.
It's always helpful.
Yes.
Good matchups, and they're taking advantage of it. Good to see Hedl healthy this year. That's been a big plus as well, having missed a lot of time last season. I want to ask you about the Avs because, I mean, they've been a story so far this year. They started out struggling. They put together some wins. Last night, they lose to Chicago. Like, to me, I look at it, and I see this more as a goaltending problem. Yeah, they could defend better in certain ways. I mean, there's certain, you have the numbers, so you'll tell us, you know, what the numbers say. But for me, I think this is more of a goaltending issue than anything else. It was, once again, Georgiev last night. He did not play all that well, in my view. What do the numbers tell us about the Avalanche?
Yeah, maybe it's a goaltender issue because Jussi
he's
been
well.
Pretty legit.
Yeah,
he's played pretty well, right? You look at they played 10 games. Colorado, Georgiev started 6, Annunen 4. Annunen has more or less stopped what he should stop. He's been fine. The Avalanche have been a little leakier in the games Georgiev has played, but, you know, statistically, he has been the worst goalie in the NHL this season.
Wow.
And I'm a guy that's always kind of been a believer in him. When he was in New York, I thought if I wanted a starting goalie, certainly a guy that can platoon, but potentially start 45 plus games, I think he's legit. And he had a huge workload last year and he was pretty good. It's been bad this year. No question about it. So goaltending wise, yeah, I think there's a goaltender problem. And overall, I would have faith in him. I think he can be the guy, but right now it's messy. As far as the team, you talk about EJ, like, all right, defensively, middle of the pack, goal probability against them, and they can always be better. One thing they've always done as a team so well is defend off the rush as well as create and kind of own that transition game. And that hasn't been as solid this year. They're missing some key players. They're not as fast in terms of team speed. Their depth has been hurt. Ross Colton might be out for a bit now, and he's been unbelievable for them. So they're just one of those teams that I don't overall worry about. With reasonable health and average goaltending, I think they're an elite team. With full health and better than average goaltending, I think they're a cup contender. So it's just where are those things going to sit in the next few weeks?
You know what's going to be interesting for me, Mike, is if they can get Kaapo Kakkonen into some games, because they recalled him now from his conditioning stint. He had some issues with the visa. They picked him up on waivers from Winnipeg, and I thought he played okay last year, Kaapo Kakkonen. He played well in San Jose behind a terrible team. He was, I think, .895 save percentage there. He came to New Jersey, small sample size, only a handful of games, but .923 save percentage. He was a highly thought-of young goalie in Minnesota only a couple of years ago. Could he be someone that maybe gets a little more playing time if he comes out of the gate playing well?
Yeah, I think so, because I agree with you, EJ. I think those are really good points that it's hard to evaluate him in San Jose because it was such a gong show last season. They gave up a ton, but he was fine. And you're right. He's a guy that's had some pedigree. I think consistency is something with him and a lot of goalies in that spot where if you can find it, then great, because he's got the skill. We know that. And really, can you buy time until Georgiev finds his form? I do think he will find it. I do believe that. But you got to be able to float, a decent record until you kind of get healthy and figure your goaltending out. I for sure think he can come in and kind of do spot duty.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to watch that ongoing situation in Colorado. But, Mike, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We'll be checking in with you throughout the season to kind of give us the data. We like the data.
Hey, you got it, guys. More games ending in OT. It's fun. Let's go.
All right. I like that, too. I think you're right on there. Mike Kelly does a great job for us here at the NHL Network, our analytics expert. When we come back, Rangers and Caps. First meeting of the season. Played in the playoffs last year. It was all Rangers. The Caps want to turn it around tonight. Tarek El-Bashir will help us break this one down. That's coming up next on First Shift. Well, here is a look at the season comparison board between the New York Rangers and Washington Capitals. They face off tonight. You can see the Rangers off to a great 6-1-1 start. But how about the Caps? 5-2 to start the season. Opened with a loss to the Devils, won the next 5. Knocked off by the Tampa Bay Lightning and looking to get back on track in this one. Joining us to talk about it is our good friend Tarek El-Bashir with Monumental Sports Network, and you see him on the NHL on TNT as well. Tarek, I want to ask you about this power play, because the Washington Capitals for many, many years now have been known to have a really good power play. Now, the last couple of years, it's been a little different. Obviously, the team has been a little different. Yeah. But, to start off 30th in the league right now, 8.7%, what's going wrong?
Well, I think the question is what's going right, which isn't a whole lot right now, EJ. It's funny. I asked Coach Spencer Carberry about it yesterday, and he was like, where do you want me to start, Tarek? Our entries haven't been good enough. We're not getting enough ozone time, a lot of one and dones, not getting any slot passes, not getting any slot shots. They're frustrated right now. This power play unit should be better. But I think if you take a big picture view of it, the last few years, the Capitals power play was so good because of the elite personnel, right? They had Nicholas Backstrom on the half wall. They had Evgeny Kuznetsov when he was in his prime on the goal line. You had Alex Ovechkin in his circle doing his thing from the office. And they've got new personnel right now, and they're still trying to find their way. But, after scoring a power play goal in each of the first 2 games of the year, they've gone 0 for 17 in the last 5 games. And Carberry and Kirk Muller, the assistant coach, they've seen enough. They're going to switch it up tonight.
Tarek, I watch the Washington Capitals. They look like they're having fun again. And I look at the team, and you just mentioned it. There's some different personnel there, where there's Jake Chychrun, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Andrew Mangiapane. Who's had in your eyes, who's been the biggest difference maker of those guys?
I think you named 3 guys who are chipping in quite a bit right now, but I would say Jacob Chychrun, for my money, has been the best of the new guys. He's second on the team in time on ice. He's playing with John Carlson on the top pair. He's getting some power play time, 2 goals, 2 assists in 7 games. He's the type of player at 26 years old that this Capitals team, they didn't have a young stud defenseman in the system. They've got some prospects who are going to be okay, middle of the lineup types, but they needed a top of the lineup guy to kind of at some point take the baton from Carlson, and it looks like Chychrun at 26 is that guy. I mean, look, it's really, really early, but through 7 games, I mean, Chychrun, for people who don't watch him on a nightly basis, and I know I didn't when he was in Ottawa and Arizona, but I mean, he's the type of player who brings you out of your seat. I mean, he breaks forechecking forwards' ankles with his shimmy moves, and he's a one-man breakout. He's been really good for this Capitals team. And I would say a close second will probably be Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's centering the Capitals' best line. Connor McMichael on his left, Tom Wilson on his right. They're both off to their best starts of their careers. I think it's no coincidence that Dubois is their center. He's got a goal and 4 assists. The numbers aren't super awesome, great right now, but I think they're coming for him. He's a smart player, and to me, guys, he's playing like a player who's got something to prove. And after bouncing around a little bit at his young age, I think he does have something to prove. He's playing hard. He's smart. You can tell he's the son of a coach. Another young player that I think is really benefiting from Spencer Carberry, who just knows where players' buttons are and when to press them. He's just doing an outstanding job with Dubois.
Tarek, how's the goaltending duo looking to you so far? You got Thompson, you got Lindgren, both guys. They catch with the right hand, so it's a little bit of a different look to have 2 guys on the same team that do that.
Totally.
How have they looked so far? I mean, obviously the team is 5-2, so they're doing something right.
It's funny, EJ, when I used to get to practice, it was really easy for me to tell, Lindgren apart from, Darcy Kemper or whoever was the goaltender.
Not anymore.
Now I gotta stody the pads and the mask, and maybe ask the equipment guy. That's Charlie right there, right?
Yeah.
It's not as easy, but it's really weird because I would say at the start of the year, I think most people, including myself, assumed Lindgren would be the number 1, undisputed, and Logan Thompson was going to be the number 2. That's just how it looked on paper. And what we've seen so far through 7 games is a straight rotation. And so I asked Carberry about that the other day, and he gave a really insightful answer. Essentially, he said, he wants to keep both goaltenders involved. He didn't give any indication that he's waiting for someone to pull away and kind of seize the role. He said, I like playing 2 goalies. He goes, I think there is some internal competition between the 2 that they want to play well so they don't miss their next start. And, I think sports science has shown us a lot lately, and particularly as it relates to goaltenders. And sorry to go off on a tangent here, but I think you can make the argument that no position in pro sports has changed as much as goaltender in hockey over the last 20, 25 years. It's a physically demanding position now because of the butterfly, up and down, up and down. It's a mentally demanding position because of all the pressure these guys are under. And when you have a goaltender who's playing every other game and not playing back-to-backs, not playing 4, 5, 6 in a row, I think that's keeping the guys fresh. And that's another thing that Carberry mentioned that he really likes about this arrangement.
Tarek, you've mentioned Spencer Carberry a number of times so far. Second-year coach now in the NHL. Last year, his first year. He made it to the playoffs, but they got bumped in 4 straight. Was it last year a big learning experience for him? And do you see growth in him as a coach?
You know, when I first realized Spencer Carberry was going to be really good as an NHL head coach, it was sometime around the middle part of the season. You know, every coach kind of comes into the year going, okay, well, here are my guys, and here's how we're going to play. And somewhere around like November, he was like, well, it's not working out exactly the way I thought it was going to be. They weren't scoring. They had some injuries. They had to adapt the way they played the game, and they had to do it on the fly. He had to get a buy-in from a veteran team, and he was able to do all of that as a young first-year head coach. And when I saw the way this team transformed, the way they played, I would say from November to like December, and then they started winning these 2-1, 3-2 games. I was like, all right, this guy has it, because that was a veteran room that was used to playing one way, and this young coach came in and convinced them, hey, if we're going to do anything, guys, we got to play this way. And they bought in, and they got the job done. And and then I think this offseason, you saw him put his stamp on the team by in conjunction with the general manager, going out and getting the types of players that could play the game the way he wanted to, and you're seeing that right now with this 5-2 start.
Tarek, what about the matchup tonight? I mean, we know the Rangers and Capitals met in the postseason last year.
Yeah.
It didn't go well for the Caps. They got swept out by the Rangers. I mean, it was a good season just to get to the playoffs last year for the Caps. But, their history, I mean, Tom Wilson, he's got a lot of friends in that Ranger locker room. So, I mean, there's always a little bounce there between Wilson and some of the Rangers. But give me your thoughts on this matchup tonight. How important it is for the Capitals to maybe send a message to the Rangers that it's a new year?
I think you're exactly right. This is a measuring stick or statement game for the Capitals. They've already knocked off some pretty good opponents in Vegas, and then they beat Dallas, and they beat New Jersey. So they've already beaten some pretty good teams. But this is the best team in the Metro coming into their building, and anyone who's been in Washington knows that every New Yorker in the whole DMV finds their way to Capital One Arena when the Rangers are in town, because basically there's a fight between the Let's Go Caps and the Let's Go Rangers chants. So it's going to be a charged atmosphere. Panarin's having a great start. Shesterkin always seems to play well against the Caps, but this is the Caps' opportunity to say and to show their opponents, hey, this is a new day. We're not last year's team that rolled over in the playoffs, that ran out of gas in the playoffs. We're a much deeper, better team, and we're going to be hard to handle this year. And a little sideshow to keep an eye on, Matt Rimpey and Dylan McElrath. I don't think it's a coincidence that those two guys are in the lineup tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if they drop the gloves and there's a good scrap at center ice.
All right. Well, listen, we'll keep our eye on that, as we always do. It should be a good one down there in D.C. Tarek, thanks for the time so much. We appreciate it. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you. Anytime, guys.
All right. Tarek El-Bashir, TNT and Monumental Sports Network. Coming back, Marc-Andre Fleury in goal for Minnesota tonight, back home in Pittsburgh. His farewell in the Burgh. We'll discuss next on First Shift.
Coming back into this building, he grew up here.
With our first pick, we'd like to select Marc-Andre Fleury.
Oh my goodness! One of the most amazing saves I've ever seen.
That's a fun, yeah.
How deep this love affair runs with Marc-Andre Fleury and the fans in this city.
And it's Fleury who whacked it out of midair.
You've got a future Hall of Famer.
Win number 227. That is a franchise record.
It's been such a great ride. This feels like home for me,
What a stop by Fleury!
This is a huge homecoming. The city loves him. He loves the city. It's going to be a special night.
Marc-Andre Fleury, one of the great characters of this era and really in NHL history. He's always comes with that smile on his face, and he's been a great, great goaltender for many years. You can see 13 seasons in Pittsburgh. First in wins, first in goals against average, first in shutouts, third in save percentage in that career, three-time Stanley Cup champion. Finishing out his career with the Minnesota Wild, he turns 40 later in November the 28th. He was the first pick in the draft for the Pittsburgh Penguins back in 2003. He gets the start tonight in Pittsburgh. He's been back with different teams over the last couple of years, but now he's back tonight knowing that this will pretty likely be his final appearance in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm sure they've had some tribute videos of him before, but this will be the final game for him.
As a player.
As a player, yeah. So, you know, what hasn't been said about Marc-Andre Fleury? First and foremost, just a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Just off the ice, you know, great family man, but, you know, he gets...
Let me ask you this. How important is it, Steve, to have a goalie in the room that is lighthearted and a little bit loose? You know, you got to get the job done, which he has done over the years, but, like, you don't seem to have to worry too much about Marc-Andre Fleury's disposition.
No. Well, he keeps it light, and for, you know, certain rooms, it can get pretty tight in there, and it can get, you know, tense. And goaltenders are typically, that's atypical of a goalie.
Yeah.
Goaltenders are typically different breeds, and they're pretty high-strung. I played with Billy Smith. I played with Mike Vernon, Dominic Hasek.
Yeah.
I mean, all these guys are really tightly wound. He's just free and easy, and I think that especially for the younger guys, it makes it a little easier to perform. You know, it lightens the mood. You know, talking about, and I remember talking to Jimmy Waite, great goaltending coach for the Chicago Blackhawks. He had Marc-Andre for a couple of years, and he said, Steve, this guy, 16 years, he had played 16 years in the NHL. He said he was willing to learn. And he goes, I'm just a goalie coach. Here's a future Hall of Famer. He was willing to listen and implement what I was telling him. So he just thought that was huge because it showed the other goaltenders that, hey, you know what, there's a goalie coach. You should listen to him. And he just loved working with them. And you know, the numbers speak for themselves. He will go into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He'll be a first ballot. And not only a great hockey player, just a wonderful human being.
Yeah, no question about that. And you saw that on display yesterday because the Minnesota Wild, I think, had practice at the facility there in Pittsburgh. They're in Pittsburgh for 3 days as they get ready for this game tonight. And he's jumped on the ice with, I think, a bantam team or something. I mean, think about how thrilling that must have been for those young kids for just a couple of minutes that Marc-Andre Fleury jumps out on the ice with you and he's stopping a couple of shots before going back in and getting, getting ready and leaving.
I saw that, and he just made their day. You know, there's this. It was
That's a story for life, right?
Yeah.
That's a story that kids will tell who are there. They will tell that story for the rest of their lives.
And there was video evidence of it, and he took the net. Apparently he was out there for a couple, 3 minutes. So good for him and those kids. Yeah, he has made fans for life of just those guys right there.
Yeah, and he's played pretty well when he's been in there this year. He had a nice performance in Tampa. We'll see how he does tonight against the Penguins team that comes back from a really tough road trip. They're desperate for a win tonight. Minnesota started the season so well, and they want to bounce back after losing to Philly.
Yeah, 7-5.
7-5 in a crazy game, which brings us to the Flyers, who are in action tonight against the Boston Bruins. You know, they've had a long rivalry with each other. And Boston's original 6, I guess Philly, you would say, is second 6, right? They came in that first expansion in '67, and great players on both teams over the years. But it's been a tough start for the Flyers this year. I think expectations were raised after a really better than expected first 2/3 of the season last year. They've had goaltending challenges this year. Urson's back in there tonight. They haven't really found anybody to be behind him, and thus you see where they are in the standings here, sitting in last place, 2-6-1. I mean, what do they have to do in your mind to kind of get turned around and be the competitive team they were last year?
Yeah, well, and I just looked at their numbers last year at this time. They were 4-4-1 after 9 games. But like you said, the latter part of the season, well, the first 2/3 of the season.
Yeah, they were competitive.
I thought they were going to make the playoffs. Yeah, I really did.
Yeah, they were in a playoff spot. They were right actually near the top of the division for parts of the season last year, and then it kind of just fell apart.
Well, I think you kind of hit on it. Goaltending's got to get better. If you don't have goaltending, you're not going to go anywhere.
You're cooked.
You're cooked. I mean, you can have the best players up front, a fantastic coach with an unbelievable game plan, but if the stopper can't stop the puck, you're going to lose your fair share of hockey games. So goaltending's got to be better. Yeah, they should probably tighten up a little bit defensively too. You know, the defenders have a job, and that's to keep typically shots to the outside. I'm noticing a lot of chances right down the gut against the Philadelphia Flyers, and you know, sometimes that's really tough for a goaltender to stop. Offensively, I think they've been doing okay. You know, goals per game, they're ranked 24th, but they're scoring almost 3 goals per game. It's the goals against that's killing you. Giving up 4.5 goals against, and their save percentage last overall. So, yeah.
Steve, 843 is not going to get it done in this league or any other. No. You know, unless you're the only team in that league, and that usually doesn't do you much good anyway. So this is a struggle for their goaltending right now. We'll say that Matvei Michkov, the young rookie that's come in, first year playing in the National Hockey League, 9 points through 9 games, and you watch him play, he has been as advertised so far.
He's a player. He's got speed. He's got strength. I think, didn't we think he was going to be in the KHL for at least another year?
You know, when he, at his draft, 2 years ago, the Flyers took him, I think they drafted him 7th overall.
Right.
He fell because people weren't sure. They thought it might be like Kaprizov, where it takes several years for him to come over here. The Flyers were able to get him over here after just 1 year. I remember at the time reaching out to Keith Jones and saying, hey, I like it. That's a kind of a gutsy pick because you're in a longer rebuild in Philly. Go get a really good player that can help you.
Right.
And he's come over sooner, and he's seemingly fit right in. I mean, if it's too bad he can't play goal, too, because that's been a big problem. But he hasn't been the issue. 9 points in 9 games is nice.
But you hit on it. I think he was ranked to go 2nd or possibly 3rd overall.
If people were sure that he would have come over soon.
Scared people off that he was going to stay in the KHL for 3 or 4 more years. And, of course, Philly took the flyer on him. No pun intended. Yeah. And now he's over there helping that team. So, yeah, he is certainly a building block. Konechny's been playing well, too. They've got a good young nucleus there. If they can figure out the back end and maybe a goaltender thrown into the mix, I think they'll be fine. And I was really surprised. John Tortorella, and LG put it in our notes, he said the guys need to relax. And you know what? Coming from John Tortorella, that kind of surprised me. But I think that's good because he's pretty high-strung. He's fire and brimstone behind the bench. But for him to come out in the press and say, hey, the guys have to relax, I hope they take that to know because, sometimes when you're playing with your hands choking the stick, you're just no good out there.
Yeah, that's certainly a problem. So maybe they'll get it to going tonight against the Bruins, build on that performance against Minnesota the other night, Bruins and Flyers in Boston. Now it is time for our DraftKings Top Line Parlay. And this is where we put together three or four, sometimes 4, this time 3 kind of different bets, put them together in a parlay and see if we can make a little money for the viewers out there and the listeners. So, Sanford, you want to jump in here and help us out? There's our producer, Sanford.
Sure, why not?
The Sandman.
I was wondering why he was dressed up today.
I know.
Oh, Sunday's best.
He's always looking sharp. So what do we got here, Sandman?
All right, well, we do have Islanders royalty on the desk there, as we alluded to earlier. So let's start off with a little New York Islanders. First to 5 shots on goal. That's a -155. What do you think tonight, fellas?
First to 5 shots. You know what? After that embarrassing loss.
And this is against the Ducks.
Yeah, that's against Anaheim. After that embarrassing loss to the Florida Panthers, I believe that they will come out guns a-blazing, and they will get the first 5 shots in this game.
And our researcher Bryce is part of putting this together, and he had some good notes on this. The Islanders a +23 shot differential in the first period, 4th best in the league. The Ducks have 72 shots on goal in the first period, but that's the 5th fewest. So when you add that up, maybe it works out. So, all right, Sam, man, we got 1 in the books. We'll take that one. What else you got for me?
All right, next up, Minnesota Wild. We just talked about this game. Fleury and net there. Wild to score first goal and in the first period. That's at +130 tonight.
Well, the Wild have scored first in 7 of their 8 games, right? So that's a trend. And the Penguins trailed first in 5 of the 10 games. How about coming after a long road trip for Pittsburgh? And it wasn't a good road trip.
No, it wasn't. And that first game back, sometimes you think, okay, we're home. We got the home crowd behind us. It should be easy.
They might be behind Fleury.
Well, and the other thing, too, is Minnesota was embarrassed in their last game, too, right? They lost 7-5.
Yeah, it wasn't a good performance for them. Yeah.
So
trailed, got back in it, took a lead, ended up blowing the lead.
I kind of like that one, too.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
All right.
They need to score first.
All right, Sandman, you got 1 more to give us a 3-way, 3 legs here?
Yeah, let's finish strong here. So LA Kings and San Jose Sharks, once upon a time, one of the best rivalries in hockey. Kings to win the first period at +110 this evening.
All right. Well, they've just played last Thursday, and the Kings jumped out to a 3-0 lead in the first period, so that's a positive. The Sharks allowed 17 first-period goals, most in the NHL. Sharks have trailed first in 8 of the first 10 games this season, so the numbers tell you.
Seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, and the Sharks, second of a back-to-back. But they did have a lot of juice in what they did at the end of that game, San Jose. Now, they got on that plane from Salt Lake. They go to L.A. Feeling good, Steve.
Yeah.
It's a fun time on that flight.
Confidence can make you play.
Are you coming out fast tonight or not?
I think they'll be competitive, but I still think L.A. What was it? That L.A. scores the first goal? Or L.A. scores the first period?
L.A. win the first period.
Wins the first period.
Yeah.
Why not? Yes.
All right, there you go.
Yes.
All right. So if you go $10 on that on DraftKings, got a chance to get $80 thereabouts, 79 and change.
8-to-1 odds. I like it.
You like that? All right. So we'll keep an eye on Bryce. I mean, we had, I think JD put together a winner last week, so that was nice. He's on his taking a little break. Got married last Friday, so happy for JD, and took a little money with him. So
quick side note: I noticed Rupper and Schneids last night had a little parlay, and they all involved Connor McDavid. Unfortunately, Connor was gone in 37 seconds.
Yeah, so there you go.
They blew their wheels.
Yeah. So we hope to do a little bit better. When we get back, we're going to take a quick break here. Look at these Florida Panthers. They're headed over to Finland. We're going with them for the global games against the Dallas Stars. We'll talk about that next on First Shift.
This week on DraftKings Sportsbook, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and sign up with promo code FLY. DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Steve, I hope your bags are packed, because we are headed over to Finland to call the Dallas Stars and Florida Panthers, 2 matchups Friday and Saturday right here on the NHL Network, the 2024 NHL Global Series. Really looking forward to this trip. We got the defending Stanley Cup champions. We got the Dallas Stars, who were in the Final Four last year in the Western Conference Final. We got 2 coaches, DeBoer and Maurice, that are very close friends. We got 7 Finnish-born players on each side, 3 on Dallas, 4 on Florida, including the captain, Barkov, who came back last night with a goal and assist. This should be 2 really good games over in Finland.
Yeah, 2 teams you might see in a Stanley Cup final.
Could be.
You talked about the coaches. How about the 2 GMs, too? Jim Nill, Bill Zito, at the top of their class as far as general managers go. You know, I watched a lot of that Florida game last night. What amazes me, EJ, is, you know, they got big forwards. Just their small area plays. And Bob Berry talked about triangle plays last night on the broadcast. They're so good in tight areas, and that's tough to do. But these guys, not only are they big, not only are they getting out of the body, but they're really handy in tight areas. So I think that's a key to today's NHL. And now look at the Dallas Stars and how they've started this year, which has been very good. They've got a lot of weapons.
Yeah, yes,
they
do.
Dave Duchesne, all of a sudden, I believe he was one of the stars of the week this year.
Yeah. 11 points in 9 games.
Ageless wonder. And then Rupe Hintz seems to take it to another level. Rupe Hintz, I believe, is Finnish, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he is.
So he'll be trying to put on a show. And then Jamie Benn, talk about ageless wonders. Jamie Benn just gets better with age. So, yeah, this will be a fantastic series, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're going to get to the airport. Looking forward to it. Going to be some good ones Friday and Saturday from Finland. Coming up next, it's NHL Now. Somebody will be here tomorrow, but it won't be us.